Speaking of locking people up for absolutely ever if they've committed as much as a single murder, the shockingly few cases where a whole life prison order has been imposed for a single murder are all coming up. Enjoy. I don't know how the police missed in their initial pat-down of Louis de Zoysa, which they performed when they arrested him on the 25th of September 2020, the gun that he had on him. With that gun, in the police station down in Croydon, the man shot and killed Sergeant Matt Ratana. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you.
Stand up, mate.
He's been a bit.
Go on.
Not understand.
I think this is it.
I understand, stand up.
So please leave.
What?
Please leave. I think I'm going to pass on.
Okay, listen to me. My name's Matt, I'm the custody officer, right? I'm in charge. I'm not involved in the investigation. You've been arrested on suspicion of possession of bullets, ammunition and possession of intent to supply.
Class B.
Class B, anything else?
No, that's it.
Alright, your detention's not been authorised yet, but I can authorise a search of you under section 54 of PACE. Stand up. Mate, you're good enough to...
With the 4 shots that he fired from what was in fact the antique gun that he'd managed to retain on his person, he hit Sergeant Ratana in the chest and leg. He got his whole life order in 2023. On the afternoon of the 22nd of May 2013, a British Army soldier, Drummer Lee Rigby of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, was attacked and killed by Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale near the Royal Artillery Barracks in Woolwich, southeast London. Both men were Muslim converts. 29-year-old Adebolajo was found guilty of Rigby's murder on the 19th of December 2013, and so was Adebowale. Adebolajo, however, held a greater share of liability for the murder of father of one Mr. Rigby, such as is reflected in his sentence compared to that of Adebowale, the sentence details coming up soon. The youngest of Adebolajo's 6 children, a little girl, was but 4 days old when, alongside an accomplice, her father went and ran over an innocent man who happened to be in the army before hacking him to death with knives and with a cleaver. In response to the arrival, around 5 minutes later, of armed police officers, the 2 murderous maniacs, who were armed with a gun as well as with the said bladed articles, charged at the police. As a result of the gunfire that they each suffered from the police, the 2 killers were hospitalised, Adebowale having one of his thumbs shot off. In contrast, and thankfully, no police officers were harmed. The calm and coherent way in which Adebolajo explained during his first court appearance his motives for his horrific act, revenge for the killing of Muslims overseas by British soldiers, offered a stark contrast to the notably stilted but no less bravado-laden speaking that he did in his police interview.
We decided to wait in the vicinity of the barracks that is in Woolwich. By the qadr of Allah, by Allah's decree, whilst waiting to find a soldier, because between us we decided that the soldier is the most fair target because he joins the army with kind of an understanding that your life is at risk when you join the army, you know. So we sat in wait, and it just so happened that he was the soldier that was spotted first.
On the 26th of February 2014 at the Old Bailey, Adebolajo got life with a minimum of 45 years, while Adebolajo got his whole life order. Wayne Couzens was allowed to appeal his whole life order for the murder that he committed in March 2021. However, in the space of less than 10 seconds, the Court of Appeal dismissed his appeal.
Couzens seeks leave to appeal against sentence. In his case, we grant leave to appeal against sentence but dismiss the appeal.
Wayne Couzens was a Metropolitan Police officer. In March 2021, he did a bogus arrest of a 33-year-old marketing executive called Sarah Everard, stopping her on the street and telling her that as she was out on the street, she was in breach of COVID restrictions and she had to go with him to the police station. What he in fact did was to drive her out of London and all the way down to Kent, rape her and then strangle her to death with his police belt. He then burnt her body in a fridge in some wood. It was in an area of some woodland that he actually owned. When Couzens was arrested, which took place in his very home on the 9th of March 2021, 6 days after he did what he did, he was completely taken by surprise. The man must have known that he was going to get caught. He doesn't seem to have taken into account the presence of CCTV or done anything to protect himself against it. He used his mobile. The data would obviously incriminate him. And keep in mind that this isn't just any old bog standard criminal. This was a police officer, somebody who knows about investigation techniques and so on, so he should have been more clued up on covering his tracks than the average basic box standard criminal. Then again, we're glad he wasn't. We're glad that he failed to cover his tracks, because thanks to his failure to cover his tracks, he got caught. Anyway, because he wasn't expecting it, or at the very least, he possibly wasn't expecting it quite so soon, he was wholly unprepared. So listen to the joke of the story that he gave the police when he admitted to abducting Sarah. This is his explanation of what he did.
Well, I am in financial shit, and I've been lent on by, I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, whatever. And they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them. There's a couple of names. I was told a place to take her. That's it. That is all I know.
There was a subsequent inquiry into the behaviour of Wayne Couzens during his career as a police officer, and it was concluded that there were so many missed opportunities to disrupt and halt the man's offending. He did things like flashing on a number of occasions. He was addicted to extreme pornography and tried to get his colleagues to watch it with him. He had a warning at one point for being excessively violent during an arrest. He went missing at one point. He was in loads and loads of debt, and when that happens, a police officer can be kicked out of the force because having money problems makes them more susceptible to bribery and corruption.
The inquiry has seen evidence that Couzens allegedly committed a very serious sexual assault against a child, barely in her teens, before his policing career even started. Problems with money also predated his career with the police. Couzens had substantial unsecured debt by the time he was arrested for Sarah's murder. At the same time, the Metropolitan Police Service were taking action to recover up to £15,000 that had been paid to him in error, and a year-long mortgage holiday was about to expire that month. It is alleged that on a number of occasions, Couzens tried to show friends and colleagues pornography, including some of a violent and extreme nature. It is further alleged that on at least 2 occasions, he shared unsolicited photographs of his penis with young women, and that he paid female online retailers to masturbate into clothes and send them to him. Since his conviction for Sarah's abduction, rape and murder, Couzens has been convicted of further crimes of indecent exposure, one of which he had already been linked to while a serving police officer.
Couzens got his whole life order in 2021. Harbi Ali is an Islamic terrorist. In October 2021, he murdered Conservative MP Sir David Amess. He stabbed him more than 20 times while attending a constituency surgery. Ali pleaded not guilty to murder, but then didn't dispute much of the evidence against him in court. He had also plotted to murder other MPs, all in revenge against those, including Amess, who had voted for airstrikes against Syria. He got his whole life order in 2022. During the Brexit vote of 2016, Thomas Mair, a far-right activist, anti-immigration, anti-anything that isn't white and British, murdered Labour MP Joe Cox. He did that in Birstall in West Yorkshire on the 16th of June 2016. Mair had researched and laid out an assassination plan, and at the point when he attacked Joe Cox, a member of the public tried to rescue her, but Mair then attacked him and stabbed him. And I'm really sorry to say that I don't know either the name of that wonderful man or what became of him. Mair got his whole life order in 2016. In 2013, Jamie Reynolds, who was born around 1990, murdered the 17-year-old daughter of a police officer and then had SEX with her dead body. And he did all of this after spending months writing a twisted tale describing how he would do it. He first of all built a so-called hanging mechanism in the loft hatch of his parents' home over in Wellington in Telford. And then at some point he was able to somehow lure Georgia Williams, an A-level student, over to his home for a fake photo shoot. Georgia agreed to pose for Reynolds while wearing lipstick, stilettos and leather shorts, which he had bought on the internet. In a picture found by the police, Georgia can be seen grinning at the camera with a noose around her neck on the landing of the house. And then moments later, Reynolds throttled his victim with the rope before hanging her from the noose in order to fulfill his sick fantasies, which had been fueled by his obsession with violent pornography. When he was caught, Reynolds was examined by psychiatrists who all agreed that if he hadn't been caught, he would have gone on to become a serial killer. He got his whole life order in 2013. As for Viktor Dembovskis, for some reason, despite his history of grapes in his home country, Latvia, the man had been allowed to remain in the UK. Sadly for Jeshma Ray-Thatha, a 17-year-old A-level student from Harrow in northwest London, this enabled the man in May 2005 to repeatedly grape her and then stab her to death on her way home from school. While the perpetrator got his whole life order for his atrocious acts against Jeshma in 2006, the effects of those acts didn't end. Unable to cope with what had happened to her big sister, you see, in 2009, at the age of 15, Jeshma's kid sister, Nishma, threw herself off the top of a car park and died from her resultant injuries. On the 3rd of April 2010, John Maden, who had an obsessive interest in pornography that related to you-know-what-ophilia, rape and torture, called his sister Lynn and asked for Lynn's daughter, his niece, to go to his home in Cheetham Hill in order to babysit his 10-year-old daughter. When Tia arrived, which was at 3 p.m, her uncle drugged her with an antipsychotic tranquilizer that he himself had been prescribed. After doing so, he inflicted a horrific catalogue of sexual injuries on his niece before stabbing her and then strangling her with a ligature made from a guitar string. At 3:45 p.m, Maden phoned the 999 emergency services and said, quote, "Hi, I would like to report a murder," unquote. And then when he was asked by the operator what had happened, or rather why he had done what he had done, he answered, quote, "Because I felt like it," unquote. He got his whole life order in October 2010. Even though the body of 5-year-old Welsh girl April Jones has never been found, Mark Bridger, who was born around 1966, is doing a whole life order for her murder. Around 7:30 on the 1st of October 2012, after letting her little girl play out, April's mother couldn't find April and she straight away called 999. The first officer on the scene spoke to a child witness who reported having seen April climbing into a grey van. The police immediately upgraded the investigation to a critical incident and launched a massive search for April, which soon brought them to the front door of Mark Bridger. Bridger said that he had accidentally run April over, but that, due to having been drunk, he couldn't remember what he'd done with the body. Nobody believed him, and in 2013, after being found guilty of April's abduction and murder, and also of perverting the course of justice, he got his whole life prison order. John Taylor got his first life sentence for a string of sexual offences that he committed from 1977 to 1987, and they include some of the most horrendous types of sexual offences that there are. Alongside those offences were grievous bodily harm and many, many other offences. He got his second life sentence in June 2002 for the murder of Lian Tianan, and that second life sentence in fact turned into a whole life order imposed on him in 2018. Phillip Heggarty murdered his friend Derek Bennett in a hammer attack in 2003. The man later set fire to a Renault Laguna after placing his victim's body in it. The man's body was so severely burnt that it had to be identified by dental records. Heggarty got his whole life order in 2004. Leroy Campbell embarked on his career as a violent criminal with the offence of rape. He did 17 years for the grape of a woman. After that, when he got out, he then raped as well as murdered a nurse called Lisa Skidmore by strangling her with a ligature. This was in Bilston. He also then tried to murder the woman's mother by strangling her with a vacuum cord. Then he tried to cover his tracks by setting fire to Lisa's room and leaving items with other people's DNA on them. The man had only been released 4 months earlier after the 17 years that he did for grape. He got his well-deserved whole life order in 2017. Born in 1977, in 1993, John McGrady was sent to prison for 5 years for false imprisonment of a young woman that he had abducted at knife point as she got off a bus. In 1998, the man was jailed for 6 years for graping and essaying 2 women that he knew. On the 25th of September 2005, Rochelle Holness, a 15-year-old girl who was a neighbour of McGrady's, disappeared after going out to call her boyfriend from a phone box near her home in Lewisham, South London. It's thought that McGrady abducted Rochelle from the phone box at knife point before taking her back to his home, where he strangled and dismembered her. 3 days after doing that, he confessed to his girlfriend what he'd done and then slashed his wrists in a suicide bid, which failed. He got his whole life order in May 2006. For reasons that aren't known to anyone other than the perpetrator, in 2013, former soldier Anwar Rosser, who was born around 1980, murdered a 4-year-old boy who lived in the home that Anwar Rosser had been allowed to stay in for the night. I can't find exactly how Rosser did what he did, but having been described as a psychotic, bullying alcoholic, he murdered the little boy, whose name is Riley Turner, while the little boy was sleeping. He got his whole life order in 2014. Thomas McDowell presents another case of someone getting a whole life prison sentence for a single murder. McDowell murdered and dismembered a trainee rabbi by the name of Andreas Hint, who was German. After murdering him, McDowell dumped the man's head, limbs and torso in bin bags in Camden, North London. McDowell, who had suffered abuse as a child and had grown up hating homosexuals, pled guilty to manslaughter on grounds of diminished responsibility. That didn't wash with the jury, however, and he went down for murder and got his whole life prison order. It was the arrest on suspicion of one violent crime against a boy that led evil paedophile Victor Miller from Wolverhampton, West Midlands, born in 1956, to confess to another, a murder to be exact. The special school that Miller attended in the 60s, Bodenham Manors School, a centre for boys with severe emotional disturbances, was near the Malvern Hills, an area of countryside spread between Worcestershire and Herefordshire. Of the 29 sexual attacks on boys and young men that Miller is thought to have committed over a 15-year period, the one that he committed on a 16-year-old boy in a park down in Brighton is what led to the term of imprisonment that the SHX offender served from 1979 to 1983. After lying low and abstaining from offending for the next 5 years, in January 1988, the predator had his attempt to kidnap a newspaper boy in Hagley thwarted when his would-be victim managed to run away and hide. A few days later, likewise, the perpetrator drove over to the village of Wellington in Herefordshire, this being familiar territory to the antagonist, remember, and made an unsuccessful attempt to snatch 18-year-old Richard Holden as he cycled home down a dark country lane. A strong 6-foot slaughterman, Richard gave his stocky, knife-wielding assailant a powerful kick in the groin before legging it. On the 17th of January 1988, less than 2 days after the perpetrator's attempted kidnap of Richard Holden, 14-year-old Stuart Goff from Hagley, Worcestershire, went on the first of his 2 early morning rounds of newspaper deliveries, which included a total of 14 houses within a few hundred yards of the newsagent's shop. The police were called sometime later that morning when Stuart failed to return to collect the papers for his second round. After an intense 2-week search, which involved more than 170 police officers, 600 public volunteers, an underwater search unit and police helicopters, Stuart's body was found in remote woodland on the southern edge of the Malvern Hills, which was all of 50 miles away from Hagley, but no less familiar territory to the person behind Stuart's murder. Miller had snatched Stuart moments after the boy delivered the last paper from his first round. After essaying and then partially strangling his victim, Miller bludgeoned him to death with a rock. Miller's disclosure to police of the location of his victim's body came after he spent several days in police custody, his arrest having come before the end of January, the perpetrator having been tracked down after Richard Holden gave police a description of the man's car when he reported the pervert's attempted attack on him. Miller's confession of Stuart's murder was triggered by the evidence that was mounting against him in relation to Stuart's disappearance. At his trial at Birmingham Crown Court in November 1988, Victor Miller pleaded guilty to murder and to various other abduction and assault charges. Having long since completed his initial 30-year minimum term, the perpetrator has never once applied for parole, having instead asked never to be released. His obvious remorse, which he once expressed in a direct address to Stuart Goff's family, does count in my opinion. As long as he does stay in prison forever, then to my mind, justice will have been served as far as possible. Before the moment when he murdered his 7-week-old baby daughter, which he did by throwing her head first onto a settee, Andrew Randall, who came from Kettering in Northamptonshire, had, on previous occasions, kicked the baby across the floor, stamped on her chest and put his fingers down her throat. He had also essayed her. After getting caught, he told police officers that he resented his 7-week-old baby daughter and that he had done so since the moment she was born. By the recognised criminal justice process, the man got his whole life order in 2007. By prison justice, in 2011, he was stabbed in the eye and had his throat slashed. This took place in Longlartin. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.